The latest on the new anthrax scare, the deadly biological agent mistakenly shipped in live form to labs all across the country, 9 states in all, and overseas as well. As there are fears, nearly 24 military members may have been exposed at an Air Force base in South Korea. Hello, I'm Ty Hernandez in New York. Now, Stanford University has confirmed it was one of the labs that may have received a batch of anthrax vials that contained live spores. Here with more on this developing story is ABC News Pentagon digital journalist Louis Martinez and Dr. Richard Besser, ABC's chief medical and health editor. Louis, it seems, let's start with you, stunning that the Defense Department lab in Utah could mistakenly send out live anthrax spores. How do we know, or do we know rather, how this happened?
Well, apparently what happened was that last March there was an irradiation technique that was going to inactivate this live anthrax so that it could be used for testing purposes. Apparently that irradiation technique did not fully irradiate or inactivate this anthrax, and so recent testing has shown that that batch contained both live and inactive spores. Now we're talking about a very small amount of this anthrax material, about 1 milliliter, but that 1 milliliter could contain billions of spores. It potentially could kill many people. So still a small amount and very deadly. Believing that this material was inactive, they then began sending it out almost within a week to several of these facilities across the country. And it wasn't until the batch that was sent out last April, but that last Friday night, one of these labs, one here in Maryland, did some testing and determined that this was in fact live vaccine, and they contacted the CDC, and that set in motion this situation right now where the CDC is receiving these shipments from these 18 labs, testing them to see if they are in fact carrying the live anthrax.
So, Dr. Besser, one small sample could have millions of spores. How bad of a breach is this, and how many people could be at risk?
Well, actually, billions of spores. The amount of anthrax that it takes to make you sick is very, very small. Very small. And when you're talking about anthrax, it exists in a form that's called a spore, which is very, very hardy. These spores live in the environment. They can live on surfaces. What they found is they can live in the environment for decades. For years and years. If you breathe them in, they can then, in a sense, hatch or germinate, cause infection, and if you wait until you have symptoms, 85% of the time the infection is fatal. So it can be very, very bad. What we're hearing and learning is that this may have been going on for quite some time. If these were inactivated back in 2014, it may be that over a course of a year, these were being used in laboratories, and thankfully, the laboratory techniques that people generally use would keep them safe from this. But now that they've recognized this is taking place, the big goal is to identify people who may be at risk and provide them with the kind of treatment that will prevent them from getting sick.
If you're in contact with someone who was in contact, let's say you go home to your family, you've been exposed, are they in danger?
The only danger there, and we talked about this a lot back in 2001, and at ABC it was a big issue because of the anthrax letter here. The only danger there is if you're in a setting where anthrax is released into the air and you have it on your clothing, you have it in your hair, you can bring it back to your home in that way. If you're sick with anthrax, we've never seen a case where it went person to person. So the only people here that they're really concerned about in terms of risk are those people who may have had contact in the laboratory.
And now, Louis, how contained is the breach at this point across the labs that received the sample? Obviously, they've all been notified at this point, correct?
Yeah, that's right. They've all been notified. There are 18 labs, 9 states here in the U.S., and 1 lab in South Korea. You mentioned at the top there these 22 military workers at an air base in South Korea. They're receiving the Cipro treatment right now because they may have come into contact with this batch as recently as last Thursday and Friday. They were conducting training on lab equipment and for future exercise. And as part of that training on the lab equipment, they also used these spores. Now, we are told that they used proper level of protective equipment in handling these spores as well as other bioagents that they were working with, and that so far none of them have exhibited any symptoms, but that as a protective measure, commanders there ordered that they all undergo this Cipro treatment. And now, what we also, like you said there, is Stanford University has also shipped their information, their material back to the CDC for testing. The only testing that we are aware of right now that has proven positive has been the one at the original facility in Maryland, as well as the original batch at Dugway. After the information came out that there was this live material out there, they went back, retested it, and determined that, yeah, there was a mix of live and inactive agent there. Now, the other thing, though, is that they wanted to ascertain that this may have been just a one-time occurrence. So they're going back to test other batches to see if they also are inactivated, and I believe that right now they have not found any others. But for now, all this material is being gathered by state public health officials and being shipped to the CDC for testing.
So, Dr. Besser, as Louis is explaining all of this, I'm thinking it is surprising to many people that this is being shipped in the mail, that we're still dealing with this volume of anthrax. Why do we do it? What are we looking for necessarily? Is this to prepare in case of an event of a terrorist attack using anthrax?
Yeah, so I was the director of terrorism preparedness and emergency response at the CDC for many years. And it is all about preparedness. There is a network of laboratories around the country. There's at least one in every state that has the ability to detect anthrax and smallpox and tularemia and all these different diseases that can be used as part of a bioterrorism attack. But for those laboratories to be ready, they have to be tested. They have to be exercised. And part of that is giving them samples and to evaluate and determine whether they can figure out what's going on there. And when you do that, you send out a couple of different things. You send out something that is a positive control, something that has the agent that you're looking for in some form, so that you can see if it's definitely there, are they able to detect that? So this is all part of that. Now, what Louis was saying about the DoD, this is also part of some work they're doing to develop new diagnostic tests, so that again we can be more prepared should there be a bioterrorism attack.
But normally, when they're shipping this back and forth, it's a dead form of anthrax, so it would not be harmful.
Exactly, but you can ship live samples. There's a program at the CDC called the Select Agent Program. They're the ones that are investigating the Pentagon right now. But they regulate the shipping and the movement of any agent that could cause dangerous illness. And so if they were planning on shipping a live sample, there's all kinds of registration and tracking and packing, safety and security measures that are put in place to make sure that people are watching that sample as it's leaving, as it's traveling, and as it's arriving, to make sure that there's no slip up. When you're shipping something that's dead, those precautions are not nearly as rigorous.
This isn't going out UPS, by the way. It's using specialized delivery service. I mean,
it's commercial.
Really?
Yeah. Because if you look at who are the best shippers in the country, it's commercial, and so it's done under contracts. They're trained in how to do this, and to make sure that all the paperwork and things are done appropriately. But it's commercial companies.
Fascinating.
That's right, Ty. If I could interject here,
Sure, Louis.
The shipping agent in this particular instance was Federal Express, at least if not in all of them, at least in most of them. And that's the question that we've been asking: is were the proper protocols being followed? Because as Rich is saying there are specific protocols depending on the type of agent that you're shipping out. But it's been surprising to most of us to find out that this is being shipped commercially. Yeah.
Okay, so what symptoms are we looking for? Obviously, when you get symptoms, it's a little late, right? You start treatment before you're symptomatic.
Right, so anyone that they think had a possibility of being exposed, what the CDC recommends is that they get 60 days of antibiotics, typically with ciprofloxacin or doxycycline. And they also get 3 doses of the anthrax vaccine. The first dose at the time they were recognized to have been possibly exposed, then 2 weeks later, and then a month after that. And the reason for that is that those spores that you inhale can lay dormant in your body for months and then come back and cause a problem. And so the vaccine will provide you with the protection once you stop taking your antibiotic. The symptoms depend on how you take it in. Anthrax, it can cause an infection of the skin. You can ingest it and it can cause an infection of your intestinal tract. Or the way we really worry about is inhaled, and there it can cause fever, chills, pneumonia. Once those symptoms start, it's a little late. Antibiotics are not very effective once you're that sick.
All right. Well, Dr. Besser, I want to thank you very much for joining us, and you as well, Louis Martinez, with us from the Pentagon. And you can keep up with this story in real time by downloading the ABC News app, starring this story for exclusive updates on the go. I'm Ty Hernandez in New York.